This is session 7 for this module. Welcome. Let's see what we have for today. All right, so for today's class, we are moving on to another word class, okay, part of speech, and that is verbs. And I say here that if you've looked at your course outline, you know we are going to have 9 sessions. And then the rest of the time we used to do some revision. So if we are doing session 7 now, that should tell you how far we've come already. Now our discussion on verbs. This is one of the very important word classes. Why do I say so? I'm not saying this to indicate that there are some word classes that are more important than others. But maybe what I mean is that this is one of the most problematic word classes. For many years, I've noticed that if somebody speaks good English, it's the way he uses verbs that usually brings it out. So if you get your tenses right, if you get how to use your verbs right, you are more likely to have a better command of the English language. So today we are going to look at verbs, how to identify them, and we'll also look at classifications and then the tense forms that we have in English. And by the end of this session, I expect that you would have learned a lot that would help you use your verbs and your tenses better. So let's begin. So what are verbs? Verbs are words that describe an action or talk about something that happens. In our lives, we always have to talk about things, right? It's not always people that we talk about, nouns. But sometimes we talk about actions that these people engage in or describe things that happen around us, and it is verbs that help us to do that. The verbs are said to be the action words in a sentence, and they describe what the subject or the noun is doing. We also say that a verb can be a sentence by itself, so just by mentioning a verb, you have given a complete sentence. Because whenever you use a word, for instance, we say sing, it actually implies you sing. So we have a noun or a pronoun in this case, and the action that we want that subject or person to engage in. Now, usually, I remember when you were growing up, or when we're all growing up, we're told that verbs are doing words. Now, we say that they are doing words because they signify the part of the sentence which explains the action being taken. So he ran away, she eats chocolates, and all that shows a doing, an action. But we should be mindful of the fact that verbs are not only about action and doing, because there are a lot of verbs that are, even though it's true that there are a lot of words that show action, there are some words that do not. There are some verbs that are non-action. What they actually do is that they describe a state of being, they describe an emotion, or express possession, or a sense, or an opinion. So these words obviously are not action words, okay? But rather they are non-action words. Examples of such non-action words are love, agree, feel, and have. So we can now say then that verbs can therefore be one action or physical verbs. So there are some verbs that are action or physical verbs. And what they do is that they specify um, physical activity. So Joe sat in his chair. This is an action, it's physical. We can see him sit in the chair. The dog breathes. It's an action that he's taking. Should we vote? Voting is an action. So we have some verbs that are action verbs or action words. And then we have verbs that are mental words. So what do we mean by mental words? Verbs being mental words. Well, it means that these are related to concepts, okay? Not action, but concepts such as discovering, understanding, thinking, or planning. And you agree with me that all these are not physical things. I don't see you understanding something or thinking, right? It's not physical, but it's something that is cognitive, is conceptual. So verbs can also be conceptual or cognitive or mental. So if somebody, for instance, says, I know the answer, she recognized me, okay, all these are cognitive things. I believe. These are all states of the mind and they are mental words. So these states of being words are also referred to as linking verbs because they show a state of being. So all these terms are used to describe those verbs that do not show action. They are inactive. They are non-action. They have no action that they are performing. These verb forms can be usually the verb to be. The verb to be can be conjugated in different ways. So you can have am, is, are, were, was, have been, am being, has been. All these are linking verbs. You remember we talked about linking verbs in our discussion of complements. Yes. So linking verbs are state of being words. So how would you know that a word is a verb? How would you look at a word in a sentence and come to the realization that this word is referring to an action or something? Well, you look at what it's doing in a sentence. If the word is referring to an action, it's referring to an event, it's expressing some processes or states of being, then it is a verb. So what the word is doing in a sentence can let you know that it is a verb. Secondly, the form that the verb takes or the form that the word takes can let you know that it is a verb. For instance, verbs have the two infinitive form. So to run, to believe, to sing, to walk, to show action or to show a state of being. So you can say to Kwame. If you say to Kwame, the two there is a preposition. It's got nothing to do with action, right? It's showing where you are going. I am going to Kwame, for instance. But here, when we talk about the two infinitive, it shows the bare form of the verb. To believe, the act, the state, the action, okay? And only verbs have this infinitive or the two infinitive form. You can't say to beautiful, for instance, or to, yeah, you can't. Also, verbs add s to show the present tense. It is only verbs that add s to show the present tense. This seems to be confusing for some people. People think that sometimes when they see nouns and the noun ends with an s, they assume that it is a verb. Or, yes, they assume it's a verb. Also, in nouns, when you add an s to a noun, you make it plural. So, dog, dogs, right? But when you add s to a verb, you don't make it plural. There's no plural form of the verb in the sense that you have for nouns, okay? So adding s does not make it plural. It actually shows the first person singular present tense form of the verb. So runs is not the plural of run. It is the first person singular present tense of the verb to run. And only nouns add s to show the present tense. Verbs have past tense. All verbs show the past tense. So when you see a word that has been expressed in the tense, in the past tense form, you know that that word is a verb. Verb also takes some specific suffixes. If you see a word that ends with en or that you can add en to or ize or ify to it and make complete sense, most commonly those words are verbs. So you have strength, but then the en make it strengthen, which is a verb. Lengthen, broaden, bolden. You have socialize, capitalize, visualize. modernize, or whatever. Eyes makes it a verb. Then the IFY is like edify, codify, solidify, whatever. All those show that those words are verbs. Now, if you're not sure if a word is a verb, ask yourself, can I do dash? And then you put that word there. If the answer is yes, then it's an action, it's a verb, or it's a state of being. So can I think? Can I do thinking? Can I do wondering? Can I walk? Can I talk? Yes, then it's a verb. You can also ask, what is happening? If you have a sentence and you ask yourself, what is happening? Whatever is happening is a state, is a verb, okay? So what is happening? Mark is eating. Mark eats his dinner quickly. What is happening? Eating is going on. So in that sentence, eat is the verb because it's the action. Now let's talk about types of verbs. We have verbs we refer to as the main verbs. And these are verbs that can stand on their own in sentences. So main verbs do not need the help of any other verb to make a sentence meaningful. And the main verb also tells you what the subject of the sentence is. Okay. Main verbs are also sometimes referred to as lexical words. So if you don't see main verbs or you see lexical verbs, they refer to the verbs that can stand on their own in a sentence. They can have different forms, the past, present forms, tense forms. Examples, so I have cook. My mother cooks well, okay? I saw the teacher yesterday. Saw here is the verb. We love fufu and okra soup. And these are all main verbs because they can stand on their own. They don't need any other verb. You can see that they are the only verbs you even find in the sentence. And the sentence still makes grammatical sense. Then we have some verbs we also know as auxiliary verbs, also known as helping verbs. These are the verbs that cannot stand on their own, auxiliary, okay? They usually are there with the main verb. So it depends on the auxiliary verbs are all the forms of the verb to be. So am, is, are, be can be auxiliary verbs. And then you can also have the form have in all its conjugated form. So have, has, had. The verb do, so do, does, did. And then the verbs can, could, may, might, shall, should, will, would, must, ought to, used to. All these are auxiliary verbs. And like I said, auxiliary verbs cannot stand on their own. They usually come along with the main verb. So here are some examples of auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. Teju is, so is here is a helping verb. The main verb is going. Okay. So Teju is going to Florida. So is the auxiliary verb. Going is the main verb. The trip might be dangerous. Be is the main verb. Might is the helping verb. Tanya could learn to fly helicopters. Here, could is a helping verb. The main verb is learn. All right. So you need to learn to identify main verbs and auxiliary verbs in any sentence that you are given. Another kind of sentence, another kind of verbs we talk about are what we refer to as linking verbs. And by now we've talked at length about linking verbs. So linking, as the word implies, links the subject of a sentence to a noun or adjective that renames or describes the subject. So that is what it is. If it is a noun and adjective, to call it, if a noun or comes after the linking verb and connects that part of the sentence to the subject, we'll call that the subject complement. So an example, Jason became a business major. Business major is referring to Jason, right? Now the word become is a linking verb that links Jason, the subject, to that thing that tells us more about Jason, and that is the complement. So become or became is an example of a linking verb. Okay. Is the commonest linking verb, or the verb to be is the commonest linking verb. So any form of the verb to be is a linking verb. So is, was, were, are, and all the other conjugated forms of the verb to be are examples of linking verbs. So that's what I've just said. The commonest linking verb is the verb to be in all its forms. Others are to appear, to feel, look, remain, stay, taste, continue, grow, prove, sound, smell, turn, and others. So these are more examples of linking verbs. Then we have some verbs referred to as transitive verbs. Now, transitive verbs are verbs or they are action verbs that always express doable activities that relate or affect someone or something. So transitive verbs express doable activities. They are also linked to direct objects, nouns, or pronouns that are affected by the verb. Okay. So in a sentence, when you have a transitive verb, you expect it to be linking, or maybe not linking, but be used in the environments in which you find a direct object, a noun, or pronoun. They are affected by the verb that is given, or receive the action of the verb. So in examples like he kicked John, John is the object. John suffers or receives the action of he doing the kicking. He is another person. So let's say it's Kwame. Kwame kicked John. So John receives the action. So kicked here is the transitive verb because it is followed by a direct object. It's followed by an object that receives the action of the verb. John punches him. Here, him receives the action of John punching. So punching here is a transitive verb and it is followed by an object. They sold the tickets. Here too, we have the verb sold followed by a direct object which receives the action of the selling. So sold here is a transitive verb. So in transitive verbs, you expect them to be followed by object, direct object. Okay. And the direct object can be a human being, can be an object, can be an animal, right? Then we have intransitive verbs. And these are action verbs that they also express durable activity, but they are different from transitive verbs because here we don't have a direct object following an intransitive verb. So whatever follows the verb will let you know whether it is transitive or intransitive. If it is a noun or a direct object that is following the verb, and that verb is a transitive verb. But if it is not, it is not for the verb is not followed by a direct object, then it is an intransitive verb. So let's see some of the things that can follow intransitive verbs. You can have a phrase, a prepositional phrase. For instance, I sneeze in the morning. In the morning is not an object, it's a period of time, right? So a preposition, a time frame. So you would find an intransitive verb followed by a prepositional phrase or a preposition. He arrived with moments to spare. With moments to spare is not a noun. Catherine sat away from the others, showing position, right? Following it is not an object. Away from the others is not an object. John eats before leaving for school. Here is also expressing some time, and that is not an object. Before leaving for school is not an object, it's not a direct object. So eats will be an intransitive verb. Now, how do you determine whether a verb is transitive or intransitive? Here are some clues. I've already even given one. Find the verb in the sentence. So first, you have to identify the verb in the sentence. And then you ask yourself, what is receiving the action of the verb? If there is a noun receiving the act, or a noun phrase receiving the action of the verb, then the verb is transitive. If there is no direct object to receive the action, and if the verb does not make sense with a direct object, then it is intransitive. All right. Now, I should also say that an intransitive verb could be followed by nothing at all. A transitive verb would always be followed by an object, a direct object, a noun or a noun phrase. But an intransitive verb will not be followed by a direct object, will be followed by a noun, prepositional phrase, or nothing at all. So I can say, I read, full stop. And there you have read there being an intransitive verb because it's not followed by a direct object. Then we also talk about ambitransitive verbs. Now these verbs can be both transitive and intransitive without changing the verb. The same form of the verb, can in some environments be transitive and in some other environments be intransitive. Let's look at an example. Here I have, I read my newspaper. And then the next one is, I always read in bed. You agree with me that in the first example, I read my newspaper or I read my newspaper, whichever tense you want to use. The verb is followed directly. In the first example, the verb is followed directly by an object. A newspaper is an object, right? My newspaper. So there we have read or read being transitive. But in the second example, I always read in bed. In bed is not a direct object. It's a place. So it therefore means that read or read in the second example is intransitive. A third example, I read, full stop, or I read, full stop. That is also intransitive. So there are some verbs that can act as transitive or intransitive verbs depending on what follows them in the sentence. More example, the little boy broke the lamp. My table broke yesterday. In the first example, we have broke being followed by direct objects, the lamp. So broke in the first example is transitive, but my table broke yesterday. Broke is not transitive, but rather intransitive. So because the verb broke can be transitive in some environments and intransitive in other environments, we call it, it is an example of a verb that can be ambitransitive. Not all verbs are like that. There are some verbs that can only be used transitively, and there are some verbs that can be used only intransitively. And then there are words too that can be both here and there. I know I have already told you to read the organized English grammar. You can learn more about transitive, intransitive verbs in that book. So once again, I'm reminding you, if you haven't bought your copy, do that. We also have some verbs referred to as ditransitive verbs. And when that means di, means two. So a ditransitive verb is one that can take both a direct object and an indirect object. So a ditransitive object takes two objects, all right? A transitive verb on its own will take one object. An intransitive verb will not take a direct object, but a ditransitive verb will take two objects. One will be a direct object and the other an indirect object. So let's see example. He gave her the letter. Now, what is a direct object? Who are we talking about? Who received the action of the verb? Her. So her is a direct object. Okay. What did she receive? The letter. So the letter becomes the indirect object. He gave the letter, but he gave her the letter. Her is a direct object, the letter is the indirect object. Because there are two objects following the verb gave in this example, we will say that in this example, the verb gave is a ditransitive verb. Such sentences can be rewritten so that you say he gave the letter to her. He bought a phone for her. He bought her a phone. He told a story to them. He told them a story. All these are examples of ditransitive verbs in sentences. So here are more. He told me a lie. The direct object is me. The indirect is a lie. Okay. We will lend Kofi the money. They will ask me questions. So all of these, you have two objects, one direct, one indirect. So these verbs in bold are ditransitive verbs. We can also think of some verbs as regular verbs. So when we refer to a verb as a regular verb, it means that that verb follows a regular pattern when switching between forms. Okay, it follows a regular pattern when switching between forms. So these regular verbs typically form their simple past and their past perfect or past participle by adding D or ED. So any verb that forms its past, simple past, and past perfect tense by adding D or ED is said to be a regular verb. So here are some example: accept. The simple past, both the simple past and the past participle of accept is accepted, achieve, achieved, boil, boiled, brush, brushed, and so on and so forth. So all these verbs, accept, achieve, boil, brush, call, challenge, are all examples of regular verbs. Why are they regular? Because they form their simple past and their past participle in a regular way. And we realize that it's actually the same. They end in ed. Now, irregular verbs do not follow a consistent pattern when changing from one form to the other. When changing from the past to the perfective or the past to the future or whatever, they do not follow a consistent pattern. Example, the verb be, the past tense can be was or were. The past participle is been. Begin, we have begun and begun. Different spelling. Break, we have break, broke, broken. Bring, brought, brought. Okay. Now all these past tense and past participle of these irregular verbs, if you look at them, you see that none of them has ed. They don't have the ed form. That is one. So anytime you have a verb that does not form its past or perfective and perfective by adding ed, then that verb is an irregular verb. Then we talk about finite. A finite verb is a verb which has a subject and shows tense. So in a sentence, if you have a verb in a sentence that shows tense and has a subject, then that verb can be said to be a finite verb or in the finite form. So you promised me the last ticket. Promised here is in the past, so it is showing tense. Secondly, it has a subject, you. So promised in this instance is a finite verb. I went for a walk. Went is a past tense of the verb to go. So we know it's showing tense and it has a subject, I. So it is a finite verb. So if you are given sentences, you only have to look at the verb first. If the verb is showing tense and has a subject, then that verb is a finite verb. Now, a non-finite verb is one that is not finite, okay? And they cannot perform action as a root of an independent clause. So most non-finite verbs found in English are infinitive, the participles, and the gerunds. These are non-finite verbs. So I've given some examples here of sentences. In each sentence, there is one finite verb and there's one non-finite verb. So the proposal has been. Has here is a finite verb. One other thing that will help you determine when a verb is finite or non-finite is simply this. A finite verb is in the present tense or the past tense. And then the other tenses would be the non-finite, okay? So the proposal has been intensively examined today. Being examined today. Has there is a finite, and then the non-finite is being examined. What did they want to have done about that? Someone tried to refuse. Now, tried is a verb in the past. To refuse is in the infinitive form. When you want to know if a verb is an infinitive, it is always preceded by to. So sometimes it's referred to as the to infinitive. So someone tried to refuse to accept the offer. So tried here is a finite verb. To refuse there is a non-finite verb. To accept is also non-finite. Again, I am trying to get the tickets. Yes. Trying is continuous form. It is not present or past. So it is non-finite. To get is also non-finite because it is in the two infinitive form. So the infinitive form of a verb is a verb in its basic form. It's a version of the verb which will appear in the dictionary. The infinitive form, we are talking about the infinitive form, which I also said is sometimes referred to as the to infinitive. And that is what you find in the dictionary. It's the basic form of the verb. Okay, so every verb will have an infinitive form, and that's the one that appears in the dictionary, and it's always preceded by to run, to dance, to think, to eat. That's a to infinitive, and the to infinitive or the infinitive form is always what non-finite. In other words, it cannot be the main verb in a sentence. Example, I need to run every day. To run there is to infinitive. Okay. Sometimes we drop it if it's not a preposition. Okay. All right. So let's look at tenses. Now, verbs come in three tenses. We have the past, the present, and the future. What this means is that we can use the tense to express something, an action or a state of mind or being that occurred in the present, in the past, and the future. Now, the past is used to obviously describe things that have already happened. The present is used to describe things that are happening right now or things that are continuous. They are still happening as we talk. And the future tense describes things that have yet to happen. So we take each of these tenses and describe how they are used in English. And start with the simple present tense. Now, the form of the simple present tense is like this. The first person singular will take the verb form write or walk. Second person, you write, you walk. Third person, he or she writes. So you see that here we have an S to show the third person singular present tense. We add an S to know that this. So if you see it writes, you know that the right there is in the simple present tense, and it is being used, or it will be used with a third person singular pronoun. First person plural would be right. Second person plural would be right. Third person plural would be right. So from now to the end, as we talk about the tenses, I'll use the examples of the verbs write and walk to see how they are conjugated. So I feel great. I am sorry to hear you're sick. Pauline practices the piano every day. Do you know how to bake a pie? How much does Pauline love pie? So all the ones in bold are in the simple present tense. Then the simple past is used to talk about things that happened or existed before now. So it's in the past. So I walked. See, walk is a regular verb, so it takes ed. You walked. He, she, it walked. We walked. You walked. They walked. Here are some examples. Wolfgang entered a hula hoop contest. He won the silver medal. Wolfgang was proud of his hula hoop victory, and so on and so forth. So all the verbs in bold are in the simple past, talking about something that has already happened, something that happened before this time. Simple future tense. Now the simple future tense is used to talk about things that are yet to happen, an action or condition that will begin and end in the future. It hasn't begun yet. And the form is will plus the root of the verb. So I will write, you will write, he will write, we will write, you will write, they will write. Example, this year Jen will read War and Peace. So it means he hasn't read it yet, or she hasn't read it yet if Jen is the short form of Jennifer, but will read it sometime in the future. And this is the simple future tense. We also have the present perfect tense. Present perfect tense. Now, this tense refers to an action or state that either occurred at an indefinite time in the past or began in the past and continued to the present time. So it started in the past and it has not ended. Okay? Continue to the present. So this tense is formed by using have or has plus the past participle of the verb. So I have walked, you have walked, it has walked, we have walked. So we started walking, we have worked for 10 hours now. We have worked. Okay, that's a present perfect tense. Example, I have walked on this path before. I have eaten the lasagna here, and so on and so forth. Then we have the past perfect tense. Past perfect tense. This one is used to complete or to show something that was completed before in some point in the past. Okay, so it is completed. It is for talking about something that happened before something else. So something happened before something else happened. And what happened first, that has ended, is what we express by using the past perfect tense. I had walked, you had walked. So here we have the past perfect of the past tense had of have, which is had, plus the past participle of the verb. So we had walked, you had walked, they had walked. Example, I turned back to the house and saw that someone named Tootles had defaced my front door. Had defaced, he has done it already in the past. He's completed that action before now. If I had woken up earlier this morning, so you see, you did not wake up. That's what it shows. I would have caught Toothless red-handed. Okay? Had Toothless caused trouble in other neighborhoods before he struck ours? So had caused is past perfect tense. Future perfect tense. Now the future perfect tense is used for actions that will be completed before some other point in the future. So it will be completed at some point in the future. And the formula is will have plus the past participle. I will have walked. You will have walked. It will have walked. We will have walked, and so on and so forth. So example, at 8 o'clock, Linda will have left. What does this mean? It means that Linda will leave before 8. Okay, so if you want to see Linda and you plan to get there at 8, by then she will have left. She would have gone already. We will not have eaten breakfast before we get to the airport tomorrow morning. So get us some breakfast. They will not have finished decorating the floats before the parade. All right, so will have plus the past, the participle of the verb gives you the future perfect tense. Perfect tense, okay? Now we have the present continuous tense. Now the present continuous tense indicates an action or condition that is happening right now, happens frequently, and may even continue into the future. So it's happening now, it's something that happens frequently, and it may be something that may continue. You are doing it now, but will continue into the future. So I am walking. As I'm talking to you now, I am walking. So that has the form, the to be verb plus the present tense of the verb. The to be plus the present tense. So I am walking, you are walking, he is walking, we are walking, you are walking, they are walking. So here are some examples. They are sitting at Scott's favorite booth, the one with the sparkling red plastic seat. The waiter is standing, so that is action that is happening right now and may even continue into the future. Past continuous. So this is used for actions or states that was happening at some point in the past. So it was happening for a period of time. It was happening. It took place for a while in the past. And the form is the past tense of the verb to be with the verb's present participle. That is the ing form. So I was walking. So that means it took a while. I walked for a period of time. You were walking. It was walking. We were walking. You were walking. They were walking. Past continuous tense. Past continuous tense. Here are some examples of that. The sun was shining every day that summer. As I spoke, the children were laughing at my cleverness. So we're laughing because the children is a plural now. We're laughing. Then we have the future continuous tense. Future continuous tense. And this is used to indicate something that will occur in the future and continue for an unexpected length of time. So the formula is will plus the verb to be plus the present participle or the verb plus ing. Okay. Now the future continuous tense is used for action verbs only. It's not used for state of being verbs. So we have I will be walking, you will be walking, she will be walking, we will be walking, you will be walking, they will be walking. Like I said, the future continuous tense is for action verbs only, not for state of being verbs. So it's actually wrong to say things like, I am loving you, or I will be loving you, right? Usually we use it for the action verbs only. Example, Michael will be running a marathon this Saturday. Eric will be competing against Michael in the race. I will be watching Michael and Eric race. Future continuous tense takes the form will plus the verb to be plus the present continuous form of the verb. Present perfect continuous. This shows something that started in the past and it is continuing at the present time. It's still ongoing. Okay, it started in the past and it's still going on now. The formula is the verb, the has or have been, plus the present participle of the root word. Okay, so I have been walking. You have been walking. It has been walking. We have been walking. You have been walking. They have been walking. Now you see the spelling of being. When you use have, the verb to be that comes with it is BEEN. Some have been using the BEING, is wrong. If you are using the verb to be, if you're using is, was, were, then you write BEING. So is being, was being, but have been, has been, had been. So be clear and not mix these two. So examples for present perfect continuous. Mia has been competing in fruit competitions recently. And this means that she will continue to do so. It's not something that has ended. I haven't been feeling well lately, which means that even as you're speaking, you're still not feeling well. That is when we use the present perfect continuous. Now, there are some verbs that are not compatible with the present perfect continuous. Example is the verb to be, to arrive, to own, and others. So you don't say, I have been owning my Mazda since 2007. You say, I have owned it, or I have been in possession, but not I have been owning my Mazda since 2007. Past perfect continuous. Now, the past perfect continuous is used to show an action that started in the past and continued up until another time in the past. So it went on for a while in the past. It started and went on for a while in the past. All this is in the past. All right. The formula is had been plus the verb's present participle. That's the ing form. So had been plus the present participle of the main verb. So I had been walking. I had been walking. You had been walking. She had been walking. We had been walking. You had been walking. They had been walking. So here are some examples. He had been drinking milk out of the carton when mom walked into the kitchen. I had been working at the company for 5 years when I got the promotion. Mother had been walking sorry, Mother had been walking 3 miles a day before she broke her ankle or her leg. So you see, when you use the past perfect continuous, you show an action that took place in the past and it continued for a certain period of time in the past. But right now, it doesn't exist anymore. You don't do that anymore. Okay. Then we have the future perfect continuous. The future perfect continuous describes actions that will continue up until the point in the future. So here the reference is the future, something that will action that will continue for a period of time in the future. The formula is will plus have plus been plus the verb's present participle or the ing form of the verb. Okay. I will have been walking. You will have been walking. It will have been walking. We will have been walking. You will have been walking. They will have been walking. Let's see how I can put this in examples. In November, I will have been working at my company for 3 years. So you see, November has not come yet. So we are talking about something that is going to happen in the future. By the time November comes, I will have been working in my company for 3 years. At 5 o'clock, she will have been waiting for 30 minutes, which means that she is still waiting as we speak. And she's going to wait till 5 o'clock, and it's not 5 o'clock yet. 5 o'clock is in the future, it's yet to come. So we use this future perfect continuous to express such things. Now that brings us to the end of our discussion on verbs. It may seem like a short discussion, but especially when it comes to the tenses, I would urge you to spend quite a lot of time learning the tense forms, okay? So if, sorry, if I give you sentences and I underline the verbs in the sentences, you should be able to tell me what tense it is in, whether it's the future, present, continuous tense, whether it's a simple past tense, whether whatever it is, you should be able to know and identify that. Also, now that you have been introduced to the tenses again, I'm sure you've done this before, be mindful of which tenses you use in your own constructions. If the thing is something that happened in the past and continued for a period of time in the past and then ended in the past, the tense that you would use to represent it won't be the same as something that started and ended in the past, or something that started in the past and is still continuing now as we speak. So be mindful of the tenses and the tense forms, and be a master at determining the tense forms of verbs that will be given to you. Also, revise or read again about the types of verbs. Now, when I was talking about the types of verbs, we talked about transitive, intransitive, ditransitive, finite, non-finite, regular, irregular. I need to let you understand that the terms are not used interchangeably, or that if a verb is finite, it can't be regular, or if it is finite, it can't be transitive. No, those types that I talked about are not mutually exclusive. Okay, so a verb can be, that same verb can be used transitively, but it could be finite and it will also have its own tense, or it will be regular. So don't think that if it is this, it can't be any of this. It depends on the question that is asked of you. I may ask you to tell me whether it is regular or irregular, whether it is finite, non-finite, whether it is transitive, intransitive, or ditransitive. When we are talking about transitivity, we are talking about what follows the verb. Is it a direct object? Is it an indirect object? Is it nothing at all? What is it? This will tell us about transitivity. The finite, non-finite talks about the tense forms in which the verbs are in, and then the regular and irregular indicates the pattern of change from one tense form to the other. So be mindful of all these small things that I've mentioned because they'll go a long way to either confuse you or make you understand things very well. Once again, I'm stressing that you need to get your organized English grammar. There are so many other books on grammar that you can use. I'm recommending the simplest one I know for this level so that from the very basics, you would understand these terms and what they are very well. If by the end of the semester I can give you a passage and you can quickly and easily tell me the parts of speech of every single word in the sentence, that would be my happiest moment. So work hard towards this. I know you can make it. All right. So that is the end for session 7, and I'll see you again session 8. Bye.